Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure for us in another episode of the Tennis Talk Coaches' Voices to have a great leader, a great tennis player, a great tennis coach. Is with us, Pat Cash. Hi, Pat.
Hey, mate. How are you? Good.
Everything okay? Nice to have you. It's an honor for us
Thank
to
you.
have you in our podcast. And as you know, this podcast is about high performance people and how many things you have to overcome to do and to be a high performance person.
Mm.
To introduce Pat Cash, everybody knows about him. He was a single player ATP number 4. He was number 6 in doubles. He won Wimbledon. He was the Wimbledon champion in 1987, 2 times Australian Open finalist in 87 and 88. He won 2 times the Davis Cup. Is an international tennis leader, an ATP coach, and also is also helping promoting our sport all over the place. Thank you, Pat, to be with us again. And let me ask you the first question, which is more personal, that people can know more in your voice. Who is Pat Cash?
A very good question. I suppose I'm best known for playing, winning Wimbledon. I suppose Davis Cup. I grew up in Melbourne, Australia. My father was an Australian rules football player. My mum was a mum who worked with my father, who was also a lawyer. So they worked together. I don't know. There's so many strings to my bow. I don't know really where to start. But I suppose I could say I'm a father of 4, grandfather of 4 now as well. I've had a couple of kids that gone through US college, played tennis out there. I'm a tennis coach. I'm passionate about the mental side of sport. So I've delved quite deeply into that for my own well-being and benefit. I've a lot of charities as well. So I've been heavily involved in everything from environmental charities in Australia, a charity called Planet Ark, which is most people will know in Australia. Certainly the slightly older people would know. Men's cancers, and lately I've been doing stuff for well-being. The Aurelius Foundation, underprivileged children. It goes on, but I suppose my passion is coaching, and as much as I love playing tennis, I think I've learned a lot through injuries and everything else that to combine that into being a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. A long and very positive career you had. Let me ask you, Pat, how was that process? No, you were a top player. You won like a Grand Slam, but also you were like an icon for tennis Australia. How was that process to become a coach, coming from to be a top player, and then how was that transformation?
Very interesting, actually. I sort of stumbled onto it slightly. Towards the end of my career, I was having a lot of injuries. I had a small section of my career where I was fully fit. I trained very hard, maybe too hard, maybe I took it too seriously. I certainly got some results from it. I was lucky I had a fantastic trainer and team, Dr. Anne Quinn, who you've had on your show. It was just fantastic. She was amazing. Left no stone unturned. We left no stone unturned to try and be the best we can. And I think that sort of got my interest into, how to get a little advantage on the court, off the court, nutrition, sports science, the mental side of it. I suppose I would say I was the first guy to have a team that was on the tour. Yeah. When I won Wimbledon, I had my coach was there, my physio was there, Anne Quinn was there, my sports psychologist was there, and I even had my stringer was in the box as well, which is and then of course my girlfriend and my parents, but my sister. But yeah, that's you hear that now, you go, well, that's kind of normal. It wasn't back in 1987. In actual fact, my father, being a lawyer, he said one of his best negotiations he's ever done in his life. In the life of a lawyer, was to negotiate enough tickets to get my whole team into the box. They wouldn't give us a box. They just said, sorry, you can't have that team. You know, it said, well, there's East Pat's team. He goes, no. You can have one coach and that's it. Maybe one extra. I said, well, no, but hold on. We got the trainer. We've got a sports psychologist. He goes, no, you can't have those. He's saying, we do have them. I'm sorry, but we do have them, and you've got to accommodate them. So I was unheard of. But they were the people that, as I said, I was like the car, I suppose, and they were the mechanics, and they sort of put everything together. And then when I started developing some injuries, and I think it was partially based upon my body type, the style that I played. Tennis was very, very aggressive. In those days, it was all over the net and lunging and diving, and hard courts a lot with the shoes weren't great. We didn't know. We was just starting to learn about rehabilitation and recovery. And it was very unusual for anybody to stretch after playing a match in those days. Before they said, okay, we stretch, but afterwards, people looking at me in the locker room going, what are you doing? You're stretching after a match. You should be just cooling down, right? Now, of course, you laugh at that sort of stuff, but you do a few stretches, a bit like the old movies. You go, yeah, okay, right, I'm ready to go. Anne took it to another whole nother level. What I did before my match, I couldn't do now. I'm pretty fit, but I couldn't do the workout that I did before I even went to the tennis court. So we really pushed it, but I developed quite a lot of injuries, and I went back to the drawing board and worked with a biomechanist called Brad Langevad, Australian guy who used to be on the circuit at a lower level, and he couldn't break through. He was a bit older than me. He went back to school and became a biomechanist and a body movement specialist, and he was working with some cricketers and things like that. And when I had my back, I worked with him a little bit, and then I realized it was very strange. At the end of my career, I came to play Wimbledon qualifying, and I saw Brad after I won my first match, and he gave me an envelope, and he said, "Don't open it until you finished it. You finish Wimbledon, then open it." I'm like, "Okay." What he said, "Just don't open it. Just do me." So anyway, I qualified, and I lost. I think I lost first or second round to Byron Black, I think. So it was towards the end of my career, and I opened it up, and he basically, having seen one match in qualifying, knew exactly my game based on my biomechanics and my technique, what I couldn't do. And it was various things like, your forehand down here, this is going to be a problem, and you miss this shot and you that shot, and you won't get hit this serve. And so I went to him and said, "How do you know all this stuff?" And he says, "Well, it's just the way that your body position, your body movement, and it's called biomechanics." I was like, "Okay, I need to know more about this." So I spent a good year and a half, 2 years working with Brad to really completely change my because I needed power. I was at the end of my career. I needed power. I was recovering from coming back from injuries. I needed my body to move better, and so I sort of stumbled into it in that way. And then I really, it was more of a mental thing. I said, I just don't want to compete. I don't want to go back on the challenger circuits. And in those days, they weren't very forthcoming with wild cards. And it sounds ridiculous, but I just couldn't get a wild card to anywhere, really. Australian Open, and that was about it. So I retired, and then Mark Philippoussis, his coach, came to me and said, I'm inexperienced at the tournament level at this high level. Can you come in and help us? So I said, yeah. And Mark's game was pretty complete. It wasn't much we had to do, just to work on some volleys, with some tactical stuff, a couple of things, but we did a lot of work on his volleys and his movement, and he did really well. He got to the US Open final, he got to number 9 in the world, won the Davis Cup that year. He had a great couple of years. Then he got injured again. He's back and forwards, but that was sort of my first taste of it. It was great, and then from then back, and then I went and made a tennis academy with my partner there back in Australia for about 10 years. And in the meantime, I was on and off to playing some legends and doing some TV stuff, CNN and various other things, commentating. And then I realized my real passion was to get back into coaching. Coco Vanderway was the first step back into that. And we had some great success with Coco. Got her to number 9 in the world. She got to won the Fed Cup as a superstar for the US team. US Open semi-finals, Wimbledon quarterfinals. Won the doubles with Ash Barty at the US Open, which was Ash's first Grand Slam. And since then, I've sort of brought in different elements that I've learned, stuff I've learned from Anne, and stuff that I've learned from Brad, and stuff I've learned, of course, from my great coach Ian Barclay, who was a tactician master. And so it's a sort of, and then the mental approach to it as well. So I take a very holistic view of coaching these days. Certainly at the top level, you can't have one thing without the other. And as we know, the champions have everything. And so if you can try and at least move towards that in some form, I find that's the way to coach. And it takes a keen eye to try and work out where to do it and where to add in and times and schedules. And that's a whole nother thing, is when to start improving things, when to implement things, when to change things. That different players react differently. Coco Vandeweghe was very stubborn. I had to convince her over a couple of months to, try a new shot or do something with her technique. And initially she couldn't make a forehand return, and we worked that out. And she's like, "Oh, my forehand's great. I just need, to warm up. It just needs, I might miss the first four or five, and then I'm good." I said, "Well, 4 or 5 means you're down a set and a break." She's like, "Oh yeah, good point." Or you miss your break points, whatever it happens to be. Then I've been working with Chiang Wang the last Q as she's known, the last couple of years, and she's the opposite. I say, "Listen, I think you should try that." Boom, next point, she's trying it. "Oh, that's great," So every player is different.
Yeah, absolutely. And you did mention Jan Barclay, which was your master coach. And, we follow because we spent the last 4 years developing system. This is one of the coaches which we followed many years ago. How many difficulties? You did talk about injuries, and but to be a top player, how was that process from a young Pat Cash coming from Melbourne to be a top player? How was the process to develop yourself like a high performing person? No?
Yeah, well, it's a long process, a long time ago, but it was reasonably amateur back then. There was Tennis Australia didn't really provide any support for the junior teams. They didn't have any money. They didn't have any teams. It was only when we started with Ian, we started being successful. We went to Avenida Cup in Milano. We won that 1 year. We won that the second year. I beat Stefan Edberg in the final. So I think Emilio Sanchez in the semi-final. And Stefan in those days had two-handed backhand. And never came near the net. He was a typical sort of Swede. Then I got the opportunity after I won that tournament to go and play junior Wimbledon, which was very exciting. And I got to the final. I was a real clay court back then, but somehow I played enough grass court tennis, and Ian developed my game and said, "Right, okay, I know you're a baseliner. You grew up on the clay in Melbourne." And he said, "But all the summer you're going to serve volley first serve and second serve." So I learned. I didn't have a great serve, as a kid, but I just learned to serve and volley. And he said, "I don't care what the situation is, you're serve volleying first and second serve." So I developed that way. Yeah, and he had a plan. He said, "I want you to win Wimbledon." And I suppose the first couple of years I just got a wild card and got a few points and got on the circuit, and got to travel with Ray Ruffles and Wally Masur, Craig Miller, who's no longer with us, Greg Whitecross. I'm sure I'm missing a couple of guys there, but they were reasonably experienced guys on the circuit. And it took us around to Japan, and we just sort of chipped away, and I got my breakthrough year in 1980. 83. At the end of 83, I won the Davis Cup with my teammates McNamee, Edmondson, and Fitzgerald, and we were all sort of about 30, 40 ranked in the world, and that was a great boost for me. I played at home, played Sweden on the grass courts there, and then the next year was a good year. But then I realized I really needed to take it to the next level of fitness, and after I hurt my back, and so I started doing some crazy exercises and all sorts of stuff, which was a lot of fun. And then I got Anne Quinn on board, and I became a lot more professional. And as I said, brought in a team, sports psychologist,
Yeah.
never heard of before. You know, the most thing you ever saw was Arthur Ashe doing some meditation and the change of ends
Yeah.
back in those days. And
It was very
it was
ahead.
just a whole different level. It was just a whole
Yeah.
different level. I just thought, and I've always been, from then, I've always been really keen on trying to find little things that would help my player, and you know, constantly on the various websites to try and get information and nutrition and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, very good. But um, talking a little bit about, because you did touch about your coaching principles, you know, which are your principles, the key principles that you apply when you are coaching with a player? What you are looking for? You know, talking about to be a high performing person. No?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to analyze, you know, which areas need to be improved. For instance, lately for Q, I was coaching against her when I was working with Coco. I ended up working with Alexi Popper and Brandon Nakashima most recently, I suppose. But then I went back to work with Q, and I had notes on her. You know, as a coach, I made on all the players we play against, and so I went through my notes. I went through her game. I talked to her and said, "Listen, you've got a really good, potentially have a really good forehand. You got a good serve. You got a good serve. You move well. We need to get more power. We need to improve all that sort of stuff." And so we went back to the technique drawing board and worked with a super fitness guy called David Daglow, Dag Athletics, DAG, who worked with Novak. He works with Seb Corder. It's almost a fix-it guy. The people come when they're really injured, and he comes and he fixes them up. He works with a lot of NFL athletes and baseballers. And I was really impressed by. I met him. I was really impressed. He's saying exactly these things that I agreed with, and so we just, again, it was just another lesson in biomechanics where we had to create more power for Q, for her forehand. And you know, if you've seen some of her matches and some of her highlights, I mean, she hits some of the biggest forehands you've ever seen. And you think of Jabeur or somebody like that is a massive forehand. Q hits it as hard or harder than any of those girls. You know, it's a matter of being consistent. And, you know, then when you had to work on the fitness and stuff, she was coming out of quarantine for a year without any tennis. And so there was a fitness element. And then there was the tactical element when you all of a sudden develop a big forehand. How do you use it? Where do you know, how can you move? So you have to start moving more like a clay courter, like a Rafa, getting around to use that, to hit that forehand. And, you know, develop that as a main shot. You know, it's different for different players. So they were the things that but you know, and then I brought in a sports psychologist as well, because Q hadn't played for about a year, and then she went back to China to play Olympics and national games and all that sort of stuff. So this year we realized that, you know, we needed to bring a sports psychologist out. She lost a little bit of confidence with being out of the game for so long. So you know, that worked really well. Did that with Coco as well. I think it's quite well known. You know, Coco's attitude can be up and down at times.
Yeah.
She's pretty fiery. So, you know, which I was as well. So so you bring different elements into it, but the basic principle is technique. If you don't have a technique, when you come on the circuit, you damn well better fix it quickly, because it's going to be found out. And you know, that's if you're lucky enough to come on the circuit with pretty good technique, you know, you can tweak little things here and there, but you can't really hide, you know, bad technique these days. So it's so important just to. I know coaches sometimes have, you know, 20 players on 3 courts and whatever, and they just want to get the kids moving, but you just cannot get away from the fact that technique is, without a doubt, the most important, in my opinion, without a doubt, the most important thing for a junior. If you have good technique, you start winning, you get more confidence, you develop your mental capacity, you can develop, you know, if you want to get fit, go and run, you know, get on the court and run. You know, if you want to get a bit stronger, okay, get some rubber bands out and do that sort of stuff. But, you know, the coaches, that can be advised, but you know, the technique is so important. And I was sort of caught in between eras where I was old school serve and volley from, you know, from John Newcomb sort of thing, and then there was the modern era of Bjorn Borg and Mats Wilander and Boris Becker of power. I was sort of stuck in between, where I was half doing this and half doing that, and it was so I learned a lot from that. But I'm not saying the other elements are not really important, knowing how to tactics and all that sort of stuff, but you've got to start with good technique. And if it's boring, the kids are bored, well, bad luck. That's my opinion. It's my opinion. Oh, I'm just doing this 100 times. Well, if you get it right, then you have to do it 80 times. Get it right, because if you don't get this backhand right, a forehand right, you never make it as a pro. I mean, you never make it to the top. You might be a great athlete, you get to 80 in the world or whatever, but you top 20, forget about it, unless you get your technique right.
Yeah, to reach your potential, you need, like you say, a very good technique, no?
Yeah, you need everything to get to the top, but at least that's a start. You can develop your strength the bigger you get. When you're 15, you're only small, or 14. So, yeah.
And Pat, talking about that, because you touched a little things about coaching, and we have a lot of coaches in the audience from all over the world listening to the podcast and Tennis One. What do you think has to be essential to be a coach? Which are the key values and one coach has to develop to be, you are a coach right now, but also you had Jan Barclay, which was a master coach, was a reference many years ago, was like old guys, some guys like Bergelin, this kind of guys, what do you think, which has to be the key factors for a coach?
Well, I think patience obviously is important, but I think attention to detail is very, very important. It's not always easy if you're in an academy, of course, or whatever. I understand that. But I think to keep an open mind and keep learning. I think that's absolutely crucial. And I continue to learn. I think I know a lot about a lot of things, but I'm still learning, and I think that's very, very important. I also think, to a certain extent, you don't want to get sucked into fads. All of a sudden you've got somebody doing something. I don't know how many times that, during my career that players started serving like John McEnroe. You just can't do that. You can't play like John McEnroe. I think John McEnroe can play like that. I think Roger Federer is really interesting. He's another one a bit like that. He's a sort of freakish sort of guy where he does some very unusual things in his technique, and only he can do it. And he does it it's just mind-boggling to see. And he's admitted it too. He says, I do some really weird things with my game, and don't necessarily try and copy everything Federer does. The same with Rafa, of course, but certain players can do it. But to have to get and have a basic understanding of biomechanics, and you can always tweak things. But fads tend to come and go a little bit, and it's hard not to get sucked into those. But it's worth having a look at them for sure. But getting to know your player, I think, is very important. Everybody's got different personality, and that sometimes takes a year or 2 years to get to learn somebody. And sometimes it's it's a bit of a honeymoon type of thing. Some coach jumps in and boom, the player does really well. And sometimes it's a breath of fresh air, or they relax, or and other times it takes a couple of years, 2 or 3 years of hard work to come through. So it's there's no set formula. I think that's what I found out about coaching and work. But this hard work is you got to have a good work ethic. So
absolutely.
That's something I enjoy as well. Get out on the court, get out there, get in the gym. I know how many times the coaches or trainers or whatever say, "Oh my God, you still train with Q? You still doing the exercise?" I go, "Well, I can't beat her, but I can't catch up with her, but I'll try. I'll give her a challenge, and to get out there and try and do it with them, and that's kind of fun. It's fun for them because they laugh at me, but that's what it's all about."
No, it's talking also about your love for tennis, which is very important. Let me ask you, Pat, because you face very challenging also time in our sport. facing battles against Becker, Lendl, Wilander, Edberg, many top players. Of course, now we have the Federers, the Nadals, the Djokovic. How big champions like you think and behave? Which is different, if you can describe some key factors about the personality of this kind of guys, because of course, every time in tennis you have 3 or 4 guys leading, those times. How was for you?
Well, I think obviously Lendl was number one for a long time, as was McEnroe. But the big power era came in, and that was Lendl and Becker really brought that in, and so that was a real bit of a shock to the system. And I talked about how I had to realize that towards the end of my career I had to change. Watching Krajicek and Sampras, these guys absolutely pound the heck out of the ball. From back in the career, these sort of guys were coming on to the Agassi, they're coming on the circuit, and I realized, okay, well, I might be towards the end of my career, but at least I can, try and get better. But I think mainly I think there's a type of obsession to try and be better, trying to try and find the I think a healthy obsession. I think mine was probably sometimes unhealthy obsession. I think I probably went too far, but and you might say, okay, Novak is obsessed, and maybe does he go too far or not? Well, I think his record stands for himself. Some players, are more natural, but and probably need less on certain things. Yeah, you sort of, come to mind. You'd say, somebody like McEnroe or Federer, for instance, are just sort of natural movers, and maybe don't need to do as much work in the gym as everybody else, but they certainly work extremely hard. And I think the misconception that the players work so much harder now than they used to, that's the biggest load of rubbish of all time. The players, we didn't have gym work, we didn't have gym sessions, but there was hours and hours of practice and hours of running, and that's why we saw quite a lot of injuries, because we didn't understand all that sort of stuff. But there was, the players, the guys trained incredibly hard. I mean, there was their career, because you couldn't walk up to the US Open or whatever and lose first round and make $60,000. You lost first round of the US Open and you made what, 500? I don't know, something like that, $500,000, which of course back then was a decent bit of money. But we were fighting for their careers, so everybody was working really, really hard. It just wasn't smart. Just wasn't as smart as it used to be, as it is now. And we'll probably look back at it in 20 years and go, oh, gee, look what we do now compared to what they did 20 years ago in 2020. So and I think a healthy bit of obsession, it goes a long way to knowing the opponents. And Murray's a great example of that. He knows the opponents, knows how they play, knows how his body is. He pushes his bodies to the limit, probably too far at times, as we know. He's continuing to go, but that's a warrior. That's sort of part of it. But there's other elements I think that are missing in tennis that I think will be explored more and more, and that's the way that the body, the hormones, the adrenal systems, the relaxation, that sort of element I think hasn't really been delved into, and I think that'll come a time where we really know. It has a little bit, because we've got these monitors to monitor your heart rate system and that sort of stuff. That's coming in. I think that'll be more advanced. It's okay, you really need a break, you need to really have a week off now or whatever. And that's still a bit of guesswork involved in
how you
that.
how you manage the energy.
I think that'll get better. Sorry, I didn't hear that bit.
No, how you manage the energy, like you say, no?
Yes, that's something completely different. Novak's gone to he's a great example of that. Where the telephone, he won't pick up the telephone an hour before he plays a match, because he knows, or whatever, half an hour before a match, because he knows that the telephone does interfere with your energy system. So that's that'll be explored more and more.
But talking about high performance and also how we behave, what you can tell us about your journey when you won Wimbledon? How was the process that you remember from the first match and then passing through every match and going to the final against London? How was your mental side, your emotions? How was that process?
Well, I was lucky I had the sports psychologist, Jeff Bond, who used to work for the Institute of Sport, used to work in the Olympians. My physio at the time, David Zucker, was the Olympic physiotherapist, and he suggested to bring Jeff on board, which I did 6-7 months beforehand, for the Davis Cup final. So Davis Cup final, playing in Australia. A lot of pressure. You're playing at home in hometown Melbourne,
Oof.
expecting to win. So that was a fantastic addition. Jeff was fantastic. At that time, I think I was just a new father, so I had a lot of unknowns, expectation. I mean, I don't think you can even underestimate the pressure and the stress that myself and my girlfriend at the time were under. We had a new baby. We hadn't been going out for not that long, I suppose you could say. I was obsessed by trying to. Here's my opportunity to try and play great tennis, and then I'm off 2 hours every day with a female trainer, going off doing running and stretching and gym work and God knows whatever else. She's there with a baby. I've got here's opportunity for me to win Wimbledon. It wasn't exactly a relaxed home life, but I was focused. I was lucky enough to be able to focus on the tennis, and this was my opportunity. I think most people in Australia knew, gee, I've got a chance to win. I was 11th seed, but I think realistically on the grass, I was probably one of the top 3 or 4 players. Becker went out early. He was the 2-time defending champion. So that I wasn't obsessed or totally focused on that. I was just focused on my job at hand. I played some really tricky matches. Paul McNamee, one of my best buddies and doubles partner, I had to play him in the second round. Play Michael Shapers, Dutchman, and I really struggled against him. I end up winning in 4 sets, but mentally, I was really wound up in that match, and but I suppose sometimes you need those tricky matches to get through, and I got through those matches and just kept getting better and better. The only set that I dropped was against Michael Shapers, and by the time I got to the final, having done all the visualization that we used to do with Jeff, and it was a great support. Of course, she was staying right nearby. She used to come over and bring special muffins, banana muffins that I didn't eat. The rest of the Aussie guys would eat straight after I finished the matches. So the nutrition was there, the physical element was there, the mental element was there. It was a matter of going and doing it, of course, which is a whole different story. But I think all the visualization, meditation work that I did the night before and the day of really helped focus my mind and settle the nerves, which were obviously pretty high when it comes to a Wimbledon final.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, and the final was a long one. You did fight a lot.
Well, not that. It was the final was a final. It was 3 sets, but it was two very close sets.
Yeah.
I mean, there's those elements as well, and not most people don't realize is that when we came out onto the court, it was a very hot, dry year, but a lot of rain beforehand, and we came out and the court was completely brown. And when we played the semi-final, we came out to the final, and I noticed the court was quite green and it was slippery. What they've done, I mean, this is absolutely mind-boggling. That they went out. They must have got the grass clippings when they cut the grass on the outside courts or around the outside of the courts. They the nice and green, and the middle of the court was all brown. They took the grass to make it look green. So it was like a clay court. All of a sudden, It became, yeah, it was so slippery. If you watch the replay, Lendl and I are slipping all over the place. Yeah, he's slipping over, I'm slipping over, slipped over about 4 or 5 times. And all of a sudden, it made the movement completely different that we've been doing. It's almost like playing on a new grass court.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't believe it, but what are you going to do? You can't exactly complain before you just got to get on with it. And lucky, I'm a little bit shorter, a little bit stronger in the legs than Ivan, and I was able to move. Didn't affect me probably as much as it did him. And obviously he's serve volleying. It's probably not his favourite thing to do, and he was forced to do that because the courts were quick and the balls were quick. He couldn't really stay back. And the era that we had, McEnroe, Edberg, myself, Becker, Mayotte, LeConte, Noah, that was an era of great serve volleys. There's no way you could stay back at the back of the court in those days. And when, having said that, Borg did it, and Connors did it to a certain extent.
Absolutely. A couple more questions, Pat, because we can talk by hours with you, but the program is shortened, and also you have to do a lot of things. What do you think about the new rule about coaching, which the ATP put in place right now? How do you see the coaching rules, which now coaches are allowed to speak with the players on the same side? No?
I've never liked it. I've never liked it as a coach. I think it can be beneficial to your player, but I just don't think it's part of tennis. I think the Grand Slam should stay away from that. I think that's the. If the ATP thinks it's going to add to the tour, I mean, I suppose it kind of goes on anyway. In the WTA, we can talk to the player down that end. I don't really regard it as a part of tennis. Not necessarily opposed to doing some of it during the tour. I think when it comes to the slams, I don't think that should be done. Because it's an individual sport. It's a gladiator sport. You've got to work it out yourself. And I think, that you can see the mental toughness of guys like Rafa who, I mean, Novak to a certain extent, Roger, I'll be very much so. They've got plan Bs, so they can work out what to do and grind the players down and work it out. I mean, Rafa's what a solution problem solver he is. Phenomenal. People go, oh, he just keeps grinding away until it breaks people down. Rubbish. He's incredibly smart. I mean, of course, Roger Federer is as well. And that's developed over years of play. And to take that away, all of a sudden go to the coach, and the coach tells you, okay, well, start serving to the body, or start serving wide, or come in. That's not, then again, you say, well, okay, well, boxing's a gladiator sport, and they get after three minutes, they come back, and the coach gets to talk to them. So it's interesting. I mean, personally, I think I won a lot of matches just by problem solving. That was one of my strengths. And the great, my coach Ian Barclay was a great problem solver, a great tactician, and I developed that and learnt that, and I could change my game and won loads of matches from doing that. So. I'm a bit lukewarm about it, but I can see both sides.
We'll see what happens with the rule, but what next? Because you are promoting a lot and you are helping many different organizations. Which next challenges you want to develop in the future to help tennis grow?
Well, I mean, at the moment, I'm in Dubai. In a hotel here in Dubai, and I'm promoting, which is going to be in February 9 to 11 here, and there's going to be a bunch of more tournaments throughout the year. So myself and Team Cash and Team Lendl, and we've got 5 or 6 ex recently retired players. They get out there and play. It's a lot, sort of like a Labour Cup type of thing, but shorter matches, 2 singles, doubles. It's fantastic. The guys are playing unbelievable tennis. Hewitt, Ferrer. And the last one, Burdage got injured, Songa got injured, unfortunately, but Baghdadis and Nalbandian and Haas and Stepanek, who am I missing? They're Leighton Hewitt, of course. Unfortunately, he's not on my team. Robredo. So it's a great little competition. I still love coaching. I'm not sure as we sit here at the sort of mid November what I'm going to do next year. That'll all be. This is the sort of time where people make decisions, new coaches, or move on, or stay on. You know, maybe I'll take I mean, 10.5 months straight with Q this year. You know, being in Chinese, it was very difficult for her to go back, and because of the quarantine, and then come back out again with any sort of form. So we travelled literally 10.5 months straight. So there's a few days off. I'm having a few days off. I need a bit of a break. So I'm not sure whether I'll dive straight back into the coaching or not. That I will at some stage, because I really do love it. There's great challenges. It's going to be extremely stressful and tough on. But my kids are kind of grown up now. So I have 4 kids that are out of the house. So they like to see dad, but they don't want to see dad too much. So the grandkids are different. They like to see grandpa. So they're in Norway. So I'll still be based in and out of London, I think, for the next little while, and we'll see what comes up. I'm not sure. I love the fact that other opportunities come up sometimes from left field, and I love a challenge. Then I think that's the most exciting thing for me is a challenge, whether it's a young player or or whatever. I love working with young players before their game is really sort of cemented.
Yeah.
Sometimes, as we talked about, some of those things that are cemented as mentally or physically or technically are cemented into their game, and it's very hard, almost impossible to break out of that. Hence why young players are exciting to work with as well.
And last question, Pat, did you enjoy your life in tennis?
Yes, absolutely. I think I'm very privileged to be able to play tennis. It could have been Aussie rules, it could have been cricket. It would have been sport of some form for me. Tennis has given me a lot of great things. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I've had a very blessed life. It hasn't always been easy. The tennis circuit is not easy by any stretch of the imagination. And I've had my ups and downs. I've literally lost count of how many surgeries I've had. I think I've had 6 or 7 on one knee, 5 on the other, 2 back surgeries, a broken Achilles tendon, carpal tunnel. You name it. That's all basically fall from tennis. And I'm still running around. So I love you learn stuff all the time. So I think one of the great things is that from the big setbacks that I've had, I've learned a lot from those. And that was the biomechanics and the rehab with injuries, the nutrition that I was forced to get involved in, and I'm imparting that. So sometimes you can put your head, get down in the dumps and think, oh, my career's gone or whatever, and may well be, but there's always something. There's opportunities to learn at some stage. So every day is a learning experience on the tennis tour. I tell you that right now. And there's lots of tears. Hopefully you get a bit of laughs and joy in between them all as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Pat, to be in our episode of the Tennis Talk, Coaches' Voices.
Thanks, Fernando.
It's a privilege for us.
Mate.
And thank you for all the things that you are doing for our sport.
Well, thanks for having me. Anytime.
Thank you, Pat.
I am Alberto Castellani, President of GPTCA, Global Professional Tennis Coach Association. Learn from the best ATP coaches in the world. I hope that at the end of this course you will learn a lot of things. I hope that I will see you on the circuit with your player. This is the goal.